Rain slammed hard against the hotel windows, washing the white roses that lined the courtyard. Guests whispered under their umbrellas, glancing at their watches. The bride was late. Too late. Inside the bridal suite, the lights were dim, soft music playing from a phone on the table. Chiamaka, the big, muscular bride everyone talked about, stood in front of the mirror adjusting the veil on her strong shoulders. Her gown fit perfectly, the satin hugging her broad frame. She looked powerful, beautiful in her own way. For once, she felt like a woman, not the protector everyone expected her to be. She smiled softly. Today is my day. Then, she picked up her bouquet and turned to her maid of honor, her twin sister, Chidinma, who had left just a few minutes earlier to check on Toby. Chiamaka thought it was sweet of her. She and Chidinma had always been different. Chidinma with her gentle beauty, her soft voice, her grace. But she was still her twin, her other half. As Chiamaka walked through the hotel hallway, she heard faint laughter coming from down the corridor. Her heart warmed at first. She thought maybe Toby was nervous and Chidinma was teasing him to calm him down. She smiled and moved closer to the sound. But as she reached the door, something in her chest froze. The laughter turned into low whispers, then soft moans. Chiamaka's fingers trembled as she pushed the door open. There, in the middle of the room, stood Toby, her groom, shirt half unbuttoned, and Chidinma, her twin sister, wrapped around him. Their lips locked like they had waited their whole lives for that moment. For a few seconds, Chiamaka couldn't breathe. The bouquet slipped from her hand and fell to the floor with a dull thud. The petals scattered, white against the carpet. Toby turned, startled, his mouth still wet. Chiamaka, this isn't what you think. Her eyes burned, but no tears came. She looked at both of them, the man she loved and the sister she trusted. And for the first time, she didn't see love in that room. She saw greed. She saw betrayal. Chidinma tried to speak, her lips trembling. Sister, please, it's not what you think. But Chiamaka raised a finger and whispered, calm and cold, continue. The silence that followed was louder than any scream. Then she smiled. Slowly, she turned, walked out of the room, and closed the door behind her. Down the hall, the wedding planner rushed toward her, panicking. Madam, the guests are waiting. Chiamaka adjusted her veil, wiped her hands, and said quietly, let them wait. When she finally walked back into that church later, no one knew what had just happened. But what she carried in her heart that day would turn a wedding into a war. Because the bride was no longer walking down the aisle for love. She was walking down for revenge. Once upon a time, in the heart of Enugu, there lived a young woman named Chiamaka Naji, strong, fierce, and fearless. She was not just strong in her spirit. No, her body, too, was built like a warrior. She had muscles that could make grown men pause, shoulders broad like a soldier's, arms shaped by years of heavy lifting, early morning workouts, and silent battles nobody saw. But what made her truly different wasn't her body. It was her heart, full of fire and full of love. Chiamaka was not born this way. Life made her this way. She was the first daughter of Chief Emmanuel Naji, one of the richest men in the southeast. Her father was known across Nigeria as a man of wisdom, respect, and great wealth. He owned companies. He built hospitals. He gave generously to churches and villages. But above all, Chief Naji was a man of tradition. And tradition, in their land, expected a son to inherit the throne, to protect the family name, the businesses, the honor. But Chief Naji had no son, only 2 daughters, twins. Chiamaka was the elder by 6 minutes. And from the day they were born, the difference between the two was clear. Chiamaka came out with her fists tight, crying loudly like a fighter. Her sister, Chidinma, was soft, calm, and quiet, even as a baby. While Chiamaka learned how to climb trees and fight off bullies at school, Chidinma learned how to walk gracefully, smile sweetly, and speak with charm. Ah, Chidinma, you're so gentle like your mother, visitors would say. But when they turned to Chiamaka, they would laugh and whisper, this one, she's her father's true child. a lion in a girl's skin. At first, those words didn't bother her. In fact, she wore them like a badge of pride. But as the years passed, she began to notice something. People respected her, but they feared her more than they loved her. Even her own father, who trained her to be strong, started changing. When she turned 16, she overheard him telling a friend on the phone, "If only I had one boy, just one to carry my name." That night, Chiamaka didn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, her jaw tight. The next morning, before the sun came up, she tied her sneakers, stepped outside, and began to run. That was the day it all started. The gym, the protein shakes, the long hours lifting weights. Not because she wanted to look different, but because she wanted to feel enough. She told herself, if I can't be his son, I'll be stronger than 10 sons put together. And she meant it. She grew tall. She grew thick. Her arms could carry sacks of rice with ease. Her legs could run from her father's mansion to the gate in 30 seconds flat. By the time she turned 22, Chiamaka had become a name that people whispered with both respect and fear. But with all her strength, one thing never came easy: love. Boys in school were either afraid of her or mocked her behind her back. "She's too manly," they said. "Who wants to date someone who can beat you in a fight? Her muscles will crush you." So she stayed alone. Even when boys came close, they went for Chidinma instead. Chidinma, with her soft voice, small waist, light laughter. Chidinma, who always smelled like fresh petals and wore high heels that clicked like music. Still, Chiamaka didn't complain. She protected her sister from school bullies. She gave up her own dreams of studying abroad to help their father with the family business. She went to meetings with men twice her age and taught them how to fear a woman without raising her voice. But everything changed the day Chief Naji fell sick. It started with small things. Forgetting dates, missing his steps, confusing names. Then, one morning, he collapsed in the garden. Doctors said it was a stroke. He never fully recovered. Within months, the man who once sat like a lion in his armchair was now a shadow, wrapped in blankets, fed through tubes. On his deathbed, he called Chiamaka. "Come closer, my daughter," he said, voice shaking. She knelt beside him, holding his hand. His fingers were cold and thin. "You have been my strength," he whispered. "You are more than any son I could have asked for. Don't let them take what belongs to you. Not uncles, not friends, not anyone. Protect your sister, and protect the Naji name." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I will, Papa." 2 days later, he passed. The house was filled with mourners. But behind the tears, Chiamaka saw greed in their eyes. Her uncles asked questions about shares. A cousin tried to search her father's study at night. People began acting like the empire was free for all. That's when Chiamaka took control. She called for an emergency board meeting. She stood at the head of the table, wearing a fitted black suit, her arms exposed, not to show off, but to send a message. "I am the daughter of Chief Naji. I may not have a beard, but I carry his blood. And anyone who tries to steal what he built will deal with me directly." From that day, nobody questioned her authority again. She sealed the companies. She kicked out leeches. She made the lawyers work day and night. Within a year, she doubled the profits her father left behind. Newspapers began to call her the Iron Lady of Enugu. But even iron can rust. Even strong people get lonely. And Chiamaka was lonely. Her mother tried to comfort her. "You don't need a man. You're already complete." But Chiamaka wanted more than success. She wanted to be seen, not as a warrior or a bodyguard, but as a woman. A woman worthy of being loved. Then, one evening, at a business awards dinner in Lagos, she met Toby. He was tall, charming, well-dressed. His voice was calm, his smile gentle. Unlike other men, he didn't flinch when she shook his hand. He didn't stare at her arms or make jokes about her size. Instead, he said, "I've read about you. You're bold. You're fearless. I like that." Chiamaka blinked. Most men find me too much. Well, he said with a grin, I'm not most men. For the first time in years, Chiamaka blushed. They talked all night. He asked about her dreams, her fears, her father, her pain. She told him things she never told anyone. Within months, they were dating. She began smiling again, wearing gowns again, laughing again. Toby told her she was beautiful, not just outside, but inside. He kissed her scars, hugged her tightly, and whispered, "You are everything." And when he knelt down one morning and said, "Will you marry me?" she cried like a baby. She said yes. She thought, finally, someone saw her. Finally, someone loved her for who she was. Chidima helped plan the wedding. She picked the flowers. She designed the cake. She held Chiamaka's hand and said, "I'm happy for you, sister. Toby is a good man." Chiamaka smiled, not knowing that her sister's heart was already full of secrets. Not knowing that Toby had been lying too. Not knowing that the two people she trusted most had already started planning her downfall. But all of that would come later. For now, she was in love. And for the first time in a long time, Chiamaka felt safe. She had no idea that her wedding would turn into a war. And she had no idea that she would win. The sound of laughter filled the dining room that Saturday morning. The smell of fried plantain and egg sauce floated in the air. Chiamaka sat across the table from her mother, still in her gym outfit, a towel hanging around her neck. She had just returned from her morning run, sweat glistening on her arms. "Chiamaka," her mother said softly, stirring her tea. "You're smiling too much these days. Who is the reason?" Chiamaka tried to hide her grin, but it was useless. "Mummy, why do you think it must be someone?" Her mother raised an eyebrow. "Because my daughter doesn't blush like this for business deals." Chiamaka laughed and shook her head. "His name is Toby." The spoon in her mother's hand stopped moving. "Toby? As in, a man?" "Yes, a man," Chiamaka said, pretending to roll her eyes. "And before you ask, he's not afraid of my muscles." Her mother's lips curved into a small smile. "Him. Finally. Someone brave enough to love a lioness." Chiamaka chuckled and took a sip of water. "He said he doesn't see me as scary. He said strength is beauty." Her mother looked at her closely. "And do you believe him?" For a moment, Chiamaka's smile faded. "I want to," she said quietly. "I really want to." The first time Toby came to their house, he came carrying flowers, white lilies, her favorite. He wore a navy blue shirt and clean black trousers. His beard was neatly trimmed. His smile was polite but confident. When he stepped into the living room, even the guards looked at him with respect. He greeted her mother properly, bowed slightly, and spoke with calmness. "Good afternoon, Ma. Thank you for welcoming me," he said. Her mother nodded slowly, studying him. "You are the young man who captured my daughter's heart." "Yes, Ma," he said with a small smile. "And I plan to keep it safe." Chiamaka laughed shyly and looked away. That day, everything felt right. Her mother warmed up to him quickly, offering him food, asking about his family and work. He said he ran a construction company and had contracts in Lagos, Port Harcourt, and in Yugu. But while everyone in the room smiled, there was one person who didn't, Chidima. She stood at the top of the staircase, quietly watching them. Her lips were curved, but her eyes were sharp. When Toby laughed, her eyes followed his face. When Chiamaka touched his hand, her jaw tightened slightly. Later that evening, when Toby left, Chidima walked into Chiamaka's room. "So this is the famous Toby," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Chiamaka smiled as she removed her earrings. "Yes. What do you think?" Chidima twirled her hair slowly and said, "He's fine. Very fine. And rich too, from the way he talks." Chiamaka chuckled. "You noticed?" "Of course," Chidima said, crossing her legs. "But sister, are you sure about him? You know some men are attracted to power, not love." Chiamaka looked at her sister curiously. "Why would you say that?" I'm just saying, Chidima said softly, her tone pretending to be innocent. You are strong, famous, respected. A man might see that and want to enjoy what comes with it. Chiamaka smiled faintly. Toby is not like that. He sees me, not my money. Chidima shrugged. If you say so. She stood up, gave a small hug, and walked out. But as she closed the door, her lips curved into a strange smile. The next few months were the happiest of Chiamaka's life. Toby made her laugh. He sent her breakfast every morning. He left her voice notes saying he missed her. He told her she was his inspiration, his everything. She found herself doing things she never did before, wearing dresses instead of suits, leaving the office early to meet him, letting her guard down. One night, as they sat on the balcony of her house, she looked at him and said, "You know, sometimes I forget I'm supposed to be strong. With you, I feel like I can just be me." Toby reached over and held her hand. "That's all I want, Amaka. Just you. Not the Iron Lady everyone talks about. Just you." Her heart melted. Nobody had ever said that to her before. A few weeks later, Toby came to see her mother officially. It was a Saturday afternoon. The compound was busy with staff moving chairs and refreshments. Even Chidima dressed elegantly in a tight-fitting white gown, her face glowing. When Toby entered the living room, he greeted everyone with that same calm confidence. Then he turned to Chiamaka's mother and said, "Ma, I have come to ask for your blessing. I want to marry your daughter." Her mother gasped. "Marry? So soon?" Toby smiled. "Yes, Ma. When a man knows, he knows." Chiamaka's eyes filled with tears. She couldn't stop smiling. Her mother placed a hand on Toby's shoulder. "You have my blessing," she said. "But promise me one thing. Never make her regret loving you." "I promise," Toby said, his eyes steady. Everyone clapped and cheered. Even Chidima smiled sweetly, though her eyes were cold. As the wedding preparations began, Chidima volunteered to help with almost everything. She became the center of attention, making calls, meeting vendors, checking decorations. "Sister, don't stress yourself," she would say every morning. "Just relax. Let me handle it." Chiamaka was touched. "You're too good to me, Kai." Chidima smiled and replied softly, "You're my twin. I'd do anything for you." But behind that smile, a dark thought was growing. It started small. Late-night chats between Chidima and Toby, at first about the wedding, then about random things. One night, after a long planning session, Chidima joked over the phone, "If you weren't marrying my sister, I'd have stolen you." She expected Toby to laugh it off, but he didn't. He paused. Then he said quietly, "You're not the only one thinking that." There was silence. Then she whispered, "You shouldn't say that." "Why not?" he replied. "You're beautiful. You know it." And that was how it began. Small talks, secret smiles, long texts, stolen moments. Chidima told herself it was just harmless flirting. But deep inside, she wanted what Chiamaka had. She always had. Her sister had the strength, the business, the money, the respect. Now she even had love. For once, Chidima wanted to be the one who won. One afternoon, as Chiamaka was leaving for a business meeting, she found Toby and Chidima laughing together in the garden. "What's so funny?" she asked, smiling. Chidima quickly stood up. "Nothing serious, sister. Just a joke about the caterer." Toby smiled too. "Your sister is hilarious. She said the caterer looks like our uncle's driver." They all laughed, but something about the way Toby's eyes lingered on Chidima made Chiamaka's stomach twist a little. That night, as they lay in bed, she said quietly, "You and Chidima seem close." Toby turned to her, surprised. "Close? She's your sister, Amaka. Of course we'll talk. She's helping with everything." "I know," Chiamaka said softly. "It's just, I noticed how you look at her sometimes." Toby chuckled. "You're jealous." Chiamaka frowned. "I didn't say that." He leaned in, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "I only see one woman. You." She smiled weakly, letting the thought fade. But as the wedding drew closer, more red flags began to appear. One evening, Chiamaka forgot her phone at home and returned early from the office. When she entered the living room, she heard laughter coming from the kitchen. Chidinma's voice. Toby's voice. She stopped by the doorway and peeked in. They were standing too close. Toby was holding a glass of juice, smiling. Chidinma was pretending to wipe something from his shirt, her hand lingering too long. Chiamaka's heart tightened. She cleared her throat. They both jumped. "Oh, sister, you're back early," Chidinma said quickly. "I was helping Toby clean a stain." Toby smiled awkwardly. "Yeah, she spilled juice on me." Chiamaka looked at both of them for a few seconds. Then she said calmly, "Next time, call the cleaner." She turned and walked out. That night, she sat on her bed, staring at the wall. Her phone buzzed with messages from vendors, but she didn't care. When Toby came in, she didn't even look at him. "You're quiet," he said softly. "I'm thinking," she replied. "About what?" She turned to him. "About loyalty. About trust. About people who forget where their boundaries are." He frowned. "Are we still on this? Chidinma and I are not." "Don't say it," she interrupted. "I just hope you're not lying to me." Toby sighed, sat beside her, and held her hand. "Amaka, look at me. I love you. I'm marrying you, not anyone else." His voice was gentle, his eyes steady, and once again, Chiamaka believed him. The engagement ceremony was grand. The compound was decorated with gold and white ribbons. The air smelled of roasted meat and perfume. Family, friends, and business associates filled the yard. When Toby and his people arrived, drums began to beat. Chiamaka walked out, glowing in her red lace dress, her muscles glistening under the sunlight. The guests clapped and cheered. "Ow! See our lioness bride," someone shouted. Toby smiled proudly as he placed a golden ring on her finger. "You make me the happiest man alive," he whispered. Chidinma, standing just behind them, smiled too. But when her eyes met Toby's for a brief second, something silent passed between them. A secret. A spark. A sin. Days turned into weeks. The wedding grew closer. Everything seemed perfect on the outside. But inside, cracks were forming. One evening, while Chiamaka was out signing papers for the company, Chidinma called Toby to her room. "Toby, I can't stop thinking about you," she said quietly. Toby stared at her, guilt and desire mixing in his eyes. "Chidinma, this is wrong." "I know," she whispered, "but when I see you with her, it kills me." He moved closer, his voice low. "We can't do this." "Then why are you still here?" she whispered. And before he could answer, she kissed him. It should have ended there, but it didn't. That kiss was the beginning of something they couldn't stop. Something dark, dangerous, and doomed. The wedding week arrived. The house was filled with excitement. Designers moved in and out. Caterers shouted orders. Cameras flashed. Chiamaka smiled through it all, unaware of what was happening behind her back. She told Chidinma to handle the final meeting with the planner. She trusted her completely. That night, after everyone left, Chidinma sneaked into Toby's hotel room. He opened the door in shock. "Are you crazy? What if someone sees you?" She pushed her way in. "I don't care anymore. Tomorrow she'll be your wife. After that, I'll lose you forever." He ran a hand over his face. "You don't understand. Kai, this is bigger than us." She looked at him sharply. "You mean her money?" He didn't answer. She smiled slowly. "Then let's take it together." Toby stared at her. "What?" "After the wedding," she whispered, "we'll find a way. We'll get rid of her. You'll take everything. I'll stand by your side." He blinked, speechless. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," she said, stepping closer. "You said you love me, didn't you?" He swallowed hard. "I do." "Then prove it." And that was how they sealed their plan, with a kiss full of lies and greed. While they plotted in secret, Chiamaka sat in her room, smiling at her father's photo. "Papa," she whispered, "I finally found someone who loves me." She didn't know that the same love she believed in would soon try to destroy her. The wedding invitations had already gone out. The decorations were ready. The world was waiting for her big day. And as she fell asleep that night, dreaming of forever, Toby and Chidinma were dreaming of her end. The sky was soft orange that evening, the sun slowly sinking behind the trees. The big family compound buzzed with life, decorators hanging ribbons, caterers shouting at assistants, and drivers carrying boxes of drinks into the hall. Everywhere smelled of perfume, flowers, and fried meat. The wedding was just one night away. Inside the mansion, Chiamaka stood before her mirror in her white dressing gown. Her strong shoulders glistened slightly with body oil. Her hair had just been braided neatly under a silk scarf, ready for the stylist the next morning. She stared at her reflection quietly, her mind heavy with thoughts. For the first time in a long time, she felt afraid, not of anything outside, but of the small voice inside her chest that kept whispering, "Something isn't right." She tried to smile at herself. "Stop it, Amaka. You're just nervous. Every bride gets nervous before her wedding," she muttered, forcing a laugh. There was a knock on the door. "Come in," she said. The door opened gently, and Chidinma walked in, dressed in a long satin nightgown, her hair flowing behind her. She looked calm and beautiful, her face glowing like candlelight. "Sister," she said softly, walking in with a tray of tea. "You've been quiet. You didn't even eat dinner. I brought you tea. It will help you sleep." Chiamaka smiled a little and sat on the bed. "You still remember I love cinnamon tea." Chidinma smiled back. "I know everything about you, sister. You forget, we shared the same womb." They both laughed lightly, but the laughter didn't last. Silence filled the room again, and Chiamaka finally said, "I can't believe tomorrow is here already." "I can," Chidinma said, sitting beside her. "You deserve happiness, sister. You've carried this family for too long. It's time to enjoy life." Chiamaka looked at her sister with a small smile. "You really think I'll make a good wife?" "You'll make a strong one," Chidinma said, forcing a kind tone. "Toby is lucky. You're not only a woman, you're a force." Chiamaka sighed softly. "Sometimes I worry that I'm too much, that maybe he'll get tired of me one day." Chidinma blinked, her eyes cold for a second. "If he does, then he doesn't deserve you," she said, hiding the sharpness in her voice. "But don't think about that now. Focus on tomorrow." Chiamaka nodded slowly. "You're right." They sat in silence for a while. Chidinma placed her hand on her sister's shoulder and whispered, "I'm proud of you, Amaka." Chiamaka smiled faintly. "Thank you, Kai, I love you." "I love you too," Chidinma replied, but her eyes told a different story. Later that night, when everyone had gone to bed, Chidinma sneaked out of her room. She walked down the quiet hallway, her bare feet soft on the marble floor. The compound lights flickered faintly outside. She wore a long robe and held her phone tightly in her hand. She reached the gate quietly and waved at the night guard. "Madam Chidinma, you dare go out?" the guard asked. She forced a small laugh. "I'm just going to give Toby the ring box he forgot. I'll be back soon." The guard nodded and opened the gate. "Okay, Ma. Make you no stay long." Chidinma stepped out into the cool night air. A black car was waiting by the corner. The driver's window rolled down, and Toby's face appeared. "Get in," he said quietly. She slipped into the passenger seat and shut the door. The car smelled of cologne and faint wine. Toby glanced at her and said, "You're crazy for coming here tonight. What if someone saw you?" Chidinma smiled, leaning closer. "Relax. Everyone's asleep. I told the guard I came to give you something." Toby shook his head. "You like playing with fire." She tilted her head and smiled. "I'm already burning." He looked away, trying to stay calm. "You know we can't keep doing this. Kai, tomorrow I'll be married." Her voice turned sharp. "Married to her, you mean?" "Yes, to her," he said firmly. Then what about me? She asked. After everything we've done? After all the things you promised me? Toby sighed and rubbed his face. You knew what this was. No, she said bitterly. I thought I did. But now, I want more. He looked at her quietly. What do you want? She leaned closer until her voice was a whisper. Her place. Toby stared at her in shock. You're insane. No, I'm smart, she said coldly. You and I both know her father left everything in her name. The house, the companies, the properties. When you marry her, you'll get access to it all. But you'll never really control it. Not as long as she's alive. Toby's jaw tightened. You're saying what, exactly? I'm saying, she whispered, we get rid of her after the wedding. Quietly. It will look like an accident. Then you'll inherit everything. We'll both disappear for a while and come back later as husband and wife. Toby's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly. Do you hear yourself? That's murder, Kai. She smiled slightly. It's not murder. It's survival. You said you love me. Now prove it. He stared at her for a long moment, torn between fear and temptation. Finally, he said quietly, let me think. She touched his hand. Don't think too long. Time is running out. She opened the car door and stepped out, her robe brushing against her legs. See you tomorrow, my love. And with that, she disappeared into the night. The next morning, the compound woke up early. The air was filled with noise and movement. Decorators arrived before sunrise, florists arranged flowers, and security men patrolled the gate. In the middle of it all, Chiamaka sat on the balcony, watching everything. She wore her gym clothes, sipping tea quietly. Her eyes looked calm, but her mind wasn't. She had dreamt of her father that night. He had stood beside her in the dream, looking serious. Be careful who you trust, he had said. The words echoed in her head all morning. When Chidima joined her, smiling and humming softly, Chiamaka studied her face closely. You look happy, Chiamaka said. Of course, Chidima replied. My sister is getting married. Why wouldn't I be happy? Chiamaka smiled faintly. You've been helping too much. Don't tire yourself. Chidima laughed. I'll rest after the wedding. Don't worry. But Chiamaka wasn't fully at ease. She couldn't explain why. Later that afternoon, Toby came to the house for the final rehearsal. The sight of him made everyone excited. The wedding planner ran toward him with papers, photographers took pictures, and even the guards smiled proudly. When he entered the sitting room, Chiamaka walked toward him with a smile. You're early. He nodded. Couldn't wait to see you. They hugged tightly. For a moment, everything felt right again. Chidima watched from a distance, pretending to type on her phone, her eyes dark and calculating. After the rehearsal, everyone went their separate ways to prepare for the big day. Chiamaka's mother blessed them both and went upstairs to rest. The house grew quiet again. Chiamaka walked Toby to his car. They stood beside it for a while, holding hands. You look worried, he said gently. She smiled faintly. Maybe just tired. It's been a long week. He stroked her cheek. Tomorrow, you'll wake up as my wife. That's all that matters. Her heart softened. I still can't believe you chose me. He laughed lightly. Why wouldn't I? You're everything. For a second, guilt flashed in his eyes, but he quickly looked away. Chiamaka didn't notice. She just hugged him and whispered, I love you. I love you too, he said, and drove away. As the car disappeared down the road, Chidima stepped out from behind the pillar, her lips curling into a sly smile. Yes, you love her, she whispered, but not for long. Night fell again. The mansion was quiet except for the hum of the generator. Chiamaka sat alone in her room, reading a note her father had written years ago. It said, when you are surrounded by snakes, walk carefully. She didn't know why those words made her uneasy that night. There was another knock on her door. Come in, she said softly. Toby entered, surprising her. Her eyes widened. Toby? What are you doing here? You're not supposed to see me before the wedding. He smiled nervously. I couldn't sleep. I needed to see you. Chiamaka frowned a little but smiled. You'll bring bad luck. He walked closer, his eyes scanning her face. Nothing bad can happen to us. She laughed softly. You say that now. He reached out and held her hands. You're strong, Chiamaka. Stronger than anyone I've met. Promise me one thing. No matter what happens, never stop fighting. She looked at him, confused. What's that supposed to mean? He shook his head quickly. Nothing. I'm just saying, life can be strange. She smiled and touched his face. You're acting weird tonight. He forced a laugh. I'm just tired. I'll go now. He kissed her forehead and walked out. As he left, Chiamaka stood at the window, watching his car fade into the night. The uneasiness grew stronger, but she didn't know why. Meanwhile, Toby drove straight to his hotel. When he arrived, Chidima was already waiting in his room. She sat by the bed in a silk robe, sipping wine. You shouldn't have come here, he said, shutting the door behind him. She smiled. You came to me. I came to say this is over, he said firmly. After tomorrow, it ends. I can't do this anymore. Chidima laughed coldly. You think you can marry her and walk away from me? He looked away. It's the right thing to do. She stood up, her eyes burning. Then do it. But know this, if you leave me, I'll tell her everything. I'll tell her about us. I'll tell her the plan. Toby's face went pale. You wouldn't. Try me, she whispered. You don't get to leave me, Toby. You belong to me now. He stared at her, his heart racing. Chidima walked closer, pressing her hand on his chest. Now come here, she said softly. Tomorrow will be her day. Tonight is ours. And just like that, he gave in again. While they sinned in secret, Chiamaka knelt beside her bed, praying quietly. God, protect my family. Protect this union. Protect my heart, she whispered. She rose to her feet, closed her eyes, and breathed deeply. Then she whispered to her father's photo, Papa, I'll make you proud tomorrow. By morning, the entire city seemed to know about the wedding. It was on social media, radio, even on TV news. The Iron Lady of Enugu to marry business tycoon, Toby Adelik. Cars filled the street leading to the mansion. Guests checked into nearby hotels. The air was filled with celebration. But inside the bridal suite, the atmosphere was still. Chiamaka sat in her chair while the makeup artist worked on her face. She looked calm, but her heart was racing. As she stared into the mirror, she saw Chidima behind her, helping arrange the gown. Their eyes met in the reflection. For a long second, neither said anything. Then Chiamaka smiled softly. You look tired. Kai, did you sleep? Chidima blinked. A little. Chiamaka nodded. After today, we both rest. Chidima smiled faintly. Yes, sister. After today, we both rest. Her tone was smooth, but inside, her mind repeated the words differently. After today, only one of us will rest, forever. That night, as everyone prepared for the morning event, Chiamaka stood by her window, looking at the stars. The compound was quiet again. She could hear the faint sound of drums from afar, echoing from the town center. She placed her hand on the glass and whispered, Tomorrow is the start of forever. She didn't know that it was also the start of betrayal. And as she lay down to sleep, just a few houses away, her groom and her twin were already sealing her fate, one kiss at a time. The morning of the wedding arrived bright and loud. The compound was alive before sunrise. Cars lined up outside the gate. Laughter, music, and the sound of women's heels echoed through the halls. The smell of perfume and hairspray filled the air. Everyone was busy, shouting instructions, adjusting decorations, fixing flowers, and calling the bride. But in the middle of all that noise, Chiamaka sat quietly by her window, staring outside. Her heart was calm but heavy. The night had been long. She had woken up twice from strange dreams, one of her father warning her again, and another of her wedding veil catching fire. She tried to shake it off. "It's just nerves," she whispered to herself. Her phone buzzed beside her. It was Toby. "Toby, good morning, my queen. Are you ready for forever?" "Chiamaka, good morning, my love. I'm more than ready." "Toby, I'll be waiting at the altar. Don't make me faint from waiting." "Chiamaka, you? Faint? Never. See you soon." She smiled as she read his messages. For a moment, everything felt okay again. She stood, looked at her gown hanging by the wall, and whispered, "It's time." Downstairs, Chidima was already dressed in her soft pink bridesmaid gown. Her face was glowing, her hair shining, her smile flawless. Nobody could guess that the woman standing there with angelic calmness had spent the night in the arms of her sister's groom. "Kai," the wedding planner called. "Please check if the bride is ready. We need to move in 30 minutes." "I'm going," Chidima said, walking toward the stairs. She climbed slowly, her heels clicking on each step. As she walked, she rehearsed in her head what she would say later. The plan was simple. They would finish the wedding, and that night, during the honeymoon trip, something would happen to Chiamaka, an accident. Toby would play the grieving husband, and she would quietly take her sister's place afterward. Everything was set. Everything was perfect. Until fate decided to change the story. Chiamaka was in the middle of dressing when Chidima entered her room, pretending to be cheerful. "My beautiful bride," she said with a big smile. "You're glowing like the morning sun." Chiamaka laughed softly. "You're the one glowing. You look beautiful." "Thank you," Chidima said, walking behind her. "How are you feeling?" "Nervous," Chiamaka admitted. "I feel like I'm dreaming. After everything I've been through, I can't believe I'm finally getting married." Chidima smiled tightly. "Dreams do come true." The stylist entered then, followed by a photographer. The next 1 hour was filled with camera flashes, makeup brushes, and soft laughter. By the time they finished, Chiamaka looked breathtaking, her strong arms balanced by the delicate lace sleeves, her eyes soft behind the long veil. Everyone gasped when they saw her. Even the wedding planner clapped. "My goodness, you look like a queen." Chiamaka laughed shyly. "Thank you." But beneath the laughter, her heart was still uneasy. Something didn't feel right. When everyone left the room to prepare the cars, she sat alone again. She picked up her father's photo from the bedside table and stared at it. "Papa," she whispered, "I wish you were here. You'd know what to say." Her throat tightened. She placed the photo back gently and stood up. She was about to leave for the car when she noticed something. Toby's wristwatch lying on the table beside her bouquet. She frowned. How did this get here? She picked it up and stared at it. The strap had his initials engraved on it. It was the one she had given him on his birthday. Her first thought was that he must have forgotten it yesterday during rehearsal. Then she remembered. Chidima had said she was going to deliver something to him last night. Maybe she brought it back. Still, her chest felt tight. Something about the whole thing didn't sit well. She slipped the watch into her purse. "I'll return it myself," she said quietly. Outside, the convoy was ready. The drivers were warming the engines. The bridesmaids were taking selfies. Everyone was excited. But Chiamaka, instead of heading to her car, told her driver quietly, "Wait, I need to see Toby first." The driver blinked. "Madam, the church." "I said wait," she said calmly but firmly. "This will only take 5 minutes." She grabbed her purse, lifted her gown slightly, and walked out of the compound. The air outside was cool. She waved at the security man to open the small gate. He hesitated. "Madam, it's time for the wedding." "I know," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I just need to surprise my groom." Toby was staying at the Royal Crest Hotel, just 10 minutes away. When she arrived, she told the receptionist, "Room 205, Mr. Toby Adelik." The lady at the desk smiled. "Ah, yes, madam. He's upstairs." Chiamaka took the elevator. Her heart was beating fast, though she didn't know why. Maybe excitement. Maybe something else. The elevator doors opened with a soft ding. She stepped into the hallway. It was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Room 205 was at the end. She reached it, adjusted her veil, and smiled. "He'll be so surprised," she whispered. She turned the handle gently. It wasn't locked. And that was when her whole world stopped. The first thing she saw was Toby's suit jacket on the floor. Then her eyes caught a woman's hair clip on the bed. Her heart began to race. She took one more step forward, and froze. There, in the middle of the room, was Toby, her groom, half-dressed, his shirt unbuttoned, his face flushed. And standing in front of him, wearing nothing but a silk robe, was Chidinma, her own twin. For a moment, the air disappeared. The walls felt like they were closing in. Toby and Chidinma both turned at the same time, their faces pale. "Chiamaka," Toby started, stepping forward. She didn't move. Her body felt stiff. Her hand slowly loosened, and the bouquet she was holding fell to the carpet. White petals scattered across the floor like snow. The silence in that room was deafening. "Toby," she said quietly, her voice shaking, "tell me I'm dreaming." "Amaka, please." "Tell me I'm dreaming," she screamed, her voice breaking. Toby took another step. "It's not what you think." Chidinma's lips trembled. "Sister, please. It just happened. It's not." Chiamaka raised her hand sharply. "Don't call me sister." Tears filled her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. Her chest rose and fell heavily. "The man I love," she whispered, "and the sister I would have died for, in my wedding room." "Amaka, listen," Toby began, but she cut him off again. "No. You listen," she said slowly, her voice trembling with anger. "You look me in the eyes and tell me how long this has been going on." Toby hesitated. His silence was the answer. Chidinma tried to walk closer, but Chiamaka's glare stopped her cold. "Stay right there," she said sharply. The three of them stood frozen, like statues in a bad dream. Finally, Chiamaka let out a small, bitter laugh. "You know what hurts the most," she said softly. "It's not that you betrayed me. It's that you did it together." Neither of them spoke. She looked at Toby's face one last time, then turned to the door. Her voice dropped low, calm but deadly. "Continue," she said coldly. "Both of you. Continue what you were doing." "Amaka, please," Toby called after her, but she was already gone. She walked down the hallway in silence. Her gown dragged behind her, brushing against the carpet. Her face was blank, but her eyes burned. The elevator opened, and the receptionist smiled as if nothing was wrong. "Madam, are you heading to the wedding now?" Chiamaka looked at her, smiled faintly, and said, "Yes, to the wedding." She walked out of the hotel, her heels clicking against the marble floor. Outside, her driver stood up quickly. "Madam, you're back. Take me to church," she said calmly. As the car drove off, she stared out of the window. Her reflection on the glass looked calm, almost peaceful, but inside her, a storm was rising. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She didn't break down. Instead, she whispered under her breath, "You both chose war. You'll get it." Back at the church, the crowd waited impatiently. The priest kept glancing at his watch. Guests were murmuring. "Why is the bride late?" someone asked. "I heard she's still getting dressed," another replied. Toby arrived a few minutes later, pretending everything was fine. He smiled, shook hands, and greeted guests. Nobody noticed the sweat on his forehead or the way his eyes darted toward the door every few seconds. When Chidinma entered quietly from the side door, she looked pale. She took her position among the bridesmaids, her hands trembling. Then, just as the whispers grew louder, the main doors opened. Chiamaka stepped in. The entire church went silent. She looked like a goddess, tall, strong, and fierce in her gown. Her veil trailed behind her, the morning light glinting off the beads. But her face was unreadable. She walked slowly down the aisle, her eyes locked on Toby. He forced a smile, but it faded quickly under her stare. When she reached the altar, the priest smiled warmly. "You may now stand beside your husband-to-be." She turned her head slightly, her eyes meeting Chidinma's for a brief second. The look she gave her could cut through glass. Then she faced the priest. "Let's begin." The ceremony went on as if nothing had happened. Toby's hands shook when he held hers. His voice cracked as he said his vows. When it was Chiamaka's turn, she smiled faintly and spoke clearly. "I, Chiamaka Naji, take you, Toby Adelik, not because I trust you, but because I want everyone to see the truth before the day ends." The crowd murmured in confusion. Toby's eyes widened slightly, but she squeezed his hand tightly, smiling sweetly for the cameras. From a distance, Chidinma felt her knees weaken. Something in her sister's tone told her this wasn't over. Not even close. When the ceremony ended, everyone cheered, but Chiamaka didn't hear them. As they walked out, she leaned closer to Toby and whispered in his ear, "Enjoy the pictures, because tonight, you'll see who really won." Toby looked at her, confused and afraid, but she only smiled wider for the cameras. By the time they entered the car that would take them to the reception, the guests were already celebrating. But inside that car, the silence was thick. Toby tried to speak. "Amaka." She held up her hand. "Don't." He swallowed hard. "Please, listen." "I said don't," she repeated quietly, staring out the window. "You already spoke this morning. With her." Toby's mouth fell shut. Then she turned her head slowly and said one last thing. "You thought you could break me," she whispered, "but you only built the woman who will destroy you both." And with that, she turned away, her eyes cold and calm. The same eyes her father once had when he was about to crush his enemies. The ride continued in silence. Outside, the world celebrated love. But inside that car, a storm of revenge was already forming. The wedding car glided smoothly through the busy roads, heading toward the reception venue. Outside, horns honked, people waved, and children shouted, "Congratulations, Ma." Inside the car, silence. Chiamaka sat beside Toby, her hands resting gently on her lap, her face calm, almost peaceful. But her eyes were sharp like broken glass. Toby shifted in his seat and cleared his throat. "Amaka, please, just talk to me." She turned her head slowly, looked at him with a small smile, and said, "You want me to talk? Okay, let's talk." His eyes brightened a little, like maybe things would go back to normal. Then she leaned closer and whispered in his ear, "I saw your lips on my sister's neck." Toby's face froze. Chiamaka sat back and folded her arms. "So, what exactly would you like me to talk about?" He swallowed hard. I didn't mean for it to happen." She scoffed. "Was it a mistake, Toby? Was it her body that confused you? Or did you forget who you were marrying?" "It was a weak moment. I didn't plan it," he said, almost begging. Chiamaka looked away. "Of course not. You didn't plan to be caught." He reached for her hand, but she pulled it back. "I said don't touch me," she said quietly. He dropped his hand slowly. "So, what now?" Chiamaka smiled faintly. "Now, we go and dance. We smile for the cameras. We play the perfect couple." "You're still going on with the reception?" he asked, surprised. She turned sharply. "Oh yes. You think I'll give your cheap betrayal the satisfaction of ruining my day?" He looked down, ashamed. Chiamaka opened her purse and pulled out her phone. She dialed a number and placed the phone on speaker. "Hello, Barrister Ease," she said calmly. "Yes, Madam Bride," the voice said cheerfully. "How's the celebration?" "I need you to do something for me," Chiamaka said. "Go to my father's office. Open the safe. Take out the blue file marked confidential. If anything happens to me today, release it to the media. All of it." The lawyer's voice changed instantly. "Madam, what's going on?" "Just do as I said," she replied, cutting the call. Toby stared at her. "What's in the file?" She didn't answer. She powdered her face, fixed her veil, and smiled. "I'll give you both a wedding you'll never forget," she said quietly. "One that will make history." The reception hall was packed. Golden lights shimmered across the white and gold decorations. A giant sign at the entrance read "Welcome to the Union of Chiamaka and Toby." Guests sat at beautifully arranged tables. Cameras flashed. The live band played soft jazz in the background. As the car pulled in, the crowd rushed forward. People shouted, clapped, and cheered. The MC grabbed the embassy. "Ladies and gentlemen, rise to your feet. Let's welcome the latest couple in town, Mr. and Mrs. Adelik." The doors opened. Chiamaka stepped out first. Her white gown sparkled under the sunlight. Her head was high, her back straight, her face unreadable. Toby came out behind her, wearing his best fake smile. They walked into the hall, hand in hand. Everyone stood, clapping and taking pictures. The couple smiled and waved, acting like they hadn't just come from a war. But Chidinma, she stood near the cake table, frozen. When her eyes met Chiamaka's, she felt her heart jump. She expected fire. She expected yelling. But what she saw was worse. Calm, silent, dangerous. Chidinma forced a smile and clapped with everyone. But her hands shook. They took their seats at the main table. The MC continued. "Let's bless this beautiful couple with cheers, laughter, and joy. Let's eat, drink, and celebrate love." Food was served. Champagne bottles popped. Music played louder. Everyone was happy. Everyone except the bride, the groom, and the secret sister. Chiamaka sat with a glass of water in her hand, watching the room like a hawk. Her mother leaned over and whispered, "You look beautiful, my daughter. But your eyes, what's wrong?" Chiamaka smiled gently. "Nothing, Mummy. I'm just tired." Her mother nodded slowly but kept watching her closely. An hour into the reception, it was time for the couple's first dance. The MC shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for the moment we've all been waiting for. The first dance of the bride and groom." The DJ played a soft love song. Toby stood up and offered his hand. "May I?" Chiamaka looked up slowly, took a breath, and stood. "Let's give them a show." They walked to the center. The spotlight followed them. Everyone watched. They danced slowly. From the outside, it looked like magic. But if anyone listened closely, they would have heard the venom behind her whisper. "You really thought I wouldn't find out," she said. "I didn't plan to hurt you," he replied, his voice shaking. "You planned to marry me, then kill me," she said calmly. Toby's eyes widened. "Kai, you know?" "I know everything," she whispered. "And you're still here because I want the world to see what betrayal looks like when it smiles in a suit." Toby's hands trembled. "What are you going to do?" She smiled sweetly. "Watch." After the dance, it was time for the couple to give their speech. The MC handed the mic to Toby first. He walked up nervously, smiled at the crowd, and began, "Good evening, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming to witness the happiest day of my life. Marrying Chiamaka is the greatest gift." He paused as the crowd clapped. Then Chiamaka stood up beside him. "Can I say something?" Toby hesitated. "Sure." She took the mic, smiled at the crowd, and said, "Thank you all for coming. Today, you didn't just witness a wedding. You're about to witness truth." The room went quiet. "I know many of you came here thinking you were watching love," she said, her voice clear. "But love died this morning, in room 205 of Royal Crest Hotel." Gasps filled the hall. Cameras froze mid-flash. Chidinma dropped her wine glass. Toby looked like he'd seen a ghost. Chiamaka continued, "Yes, that's where I found my groom. And my twin sister. Together. On my wedding day." More gasps. The hall exploded with noise. Guests shouted. Others stood up. Chiamaka held up her hand. "I'm not done." She looked straight at the camera. "This wedding was built on lies. But I'm not broken. I'm not destroyed. I am the daughter of Chief Naji. I am not a woman you betray and walk away from." She turned to Toby and said coldly, "You had the chance to stand beside me. Now you'll watch me rise without you." She turned to Chidinma, who was frozen in shock. "You? I trusted you. I defended you. You wore my clothes, ate my food, and smiled in my face while sleeping with the man I loved." Chidinma's lips trembled. "Sister, please." "Don't call me sister," Chiamaka said sharply. She turned to the crowd and raised her voice. "Let this be a warning. Never betray a woman who has nothing left to lose. Because when she returns, she comes with fire." The hall exploded with noise again. Cameras turned. Guests began shouting. Chiamaka dropped the mic on the table, turned around, and walked out of the hall, her head high, her gown flowing behind her like a queen leaving a battlefield. Toby just stood there, speechless. Chidinma collapsed into her chair, tears falling freely. And outside, as the sun began to set, Chiamaka stepped into her car, closed the door, and whispered, "The storm has just started." The sun had started to set, casting long shadows across the white reception hall. Inside, it was chaos. Guests were still standing. Some were arguing, some whispering loudly, and others just staring, unsure of what to do. The music had stopped. The champagne glasses were still full. The wedding had come to a sudden halt. But the bride, Chiamaka, was gone. She had walked out like a storm, quiet, cold, and final. Toby stood near the stage, frozen, sweat running down his neck. His hands trembled as he held onto the microphone stand like it was the only thing keeping him from falling. Chidinma, still sitting near the cake table, was pale. Her makeup was ruined from crying. Her lips shook as she whispered to herself over and over, "No, no, no." Suddenly, someone shouted from the back of the hall, "Is it true?" Everyone turned. Another voice followed, louder this time. "So the groom cheated with the bride's sister." "This is madness," someone else said. Phones were raised. Cameras were on. Live streams were running. The video of Chiamaka's speech was already flying across social media like wildfire. Toby stumbled back and walked off the stage. He found his way to a corner and sat down, burying his face in his hands. He couldn't breathe. His mouth was dry. What had he done? What had they done? Outside, Chiamaka sat in the backseat of a black car with tinted windows, parked under the trees behind the building. She didn't cry. She didn't move. She simply stared at her reflection in the car window. Her phone buzzed. Barrister Ease was calling. She answered. "Yes. Madam, the video is everywhere," he said quickly. "Twitter, Instagram, even WhatsApp groups. Everyone has seen it." Chiamaka nodded. "Good." The lawyer hesitated. "And the file?" "Keep it ready," she said. "I'm not done yet." "Yes, madam," he replied. She ended the call and sat back. Her fists tightened slowly. Her chest burned, not from sadness, but from betrayal, from fire that had nowhere to go yet. She thought of her father. She thought of the enemies he fought to protect them. She never imagined the real enemy would be her own blood. Back in the hall, Chidinma finally stood up. Her legs shook as she walked toward Toby, who was still sitting in the corner, hiding from the stairs. She knelt beside him. "What do we do now?" she whispered. Toby looked at her, his face pale. You said she wouldn't find out. You said she'd never know." "I didn't know she'd come to the hotel." "You told me to go through with the wedding," he snapped. "And you agreed," she shot back. "You said we'd finish it and then kill her," he said bitterly. "That's what you said." Chidinma's face twisted in fear. "Lower your voice." People were watching. Some guests were already pointing at them. "We need to get out of here," Toby muttered. "Now." But before they could move, the projector screen on the stage lit up. Everyone turned toward it. A loud click sound came from the speakers. Then the video began to play. It was a recording, a conversation, a familiar voice. Toby's voice. "She's strong, yes, but once we're married, she'll be gone." The will says everything goes to the husband if she dies. Gasps filled the room. Then came Chidema's voice. We'll make it look like an accident. After the honeymoon, nobody will suspect anything. Screams followed. Guests stood in shock. What? Did you hear that? They plan to kill her. Toby stood up, his legs wobbly. What is this? What the hell is this? Chidema turned white. No, 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 no. Then Chiamaka's voice came through the speakers, calm and clear. You both chose to play with fire. I warned you. I told you not to mistake silence for weakness. Now, let's see how strong you are when the truth is louder than your lies. The screen faded to black. Silence. Then, police sirens. 2 uniformed officers entered the reception hall with straight faces and firm steps. They walked toward the couple's table. Mr. Toby Adelik, one officer said. Toby stepped back. Wait, this is a mistake. You are under investigation for attempted conspiracy to commit murder and fraud. No, listen, wait. Madam Chidema Naji, the second officer said. Chidema began crying loudly. It was just talk. I didn't mean it. Please, I'm her sister. You have the right to remain silent, the officer said as they took her arm. The guests stood back, recording, gasping, whispering. Some clapped. Others shouted, "Wicked people." The twins' mother stood frozen near the corner, unable to speak. Her hands shook as she watched her daughter being taken away. From the car, Chiamaka watched it all on her phone. Her assistant had sent her a live stream. She saw the moment the officers took them out. She saw the guests whisper. She saw the fear on their faces. Then, and only then, did a small smile return to her lips. She rolled down the window slightly and said to her driver, "Let's go." "Home, madam." "No," she said, "to my father's grave." They drove through the quiet evening until they reached the family's private cemetery behind their estate. Chiamaka stepped out alone. The wind blew softly, brushing against her torn gown. She walked to the simple white marble stone that read, Chief Emmanuel Naji. A lion never dies, he rests. She knelt. "Papa," she whispered, "you were right. When you're surrounded by snakes, walk carefully." I didn't walk carefully, but I fought back. She touched the stone gently. "I protected your name. I protected everything." Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away. "I wish you were here to see it." She stood up slowly. From behind her, her assistant appeared quietly. "Madam, are you okay?" Chiamaka nodded. "Yes." "Should I cancel the press conference tomorrow?" She turned and shook her head. "No. Let the world hear it from me." She looked back at the grave one last time and whispered, "I buried the wedding, but I'm still standing." That night, headlines across Nigeria screamed the same thing. Wedding turns to arrest. Muscular bride exposes twin and groom in shocking video. Iron Lady of Enugu stops her own wedding. Full confession recording leaked. Real-life Nollywood. Betrayal, love, power, and revenge. And in every photo, one image stood out. Chiamaka Naji, walking out of her own wedding like a queen with fire in her eyes. The next morning, the news was everywhere. Every blog, every radio station, every TV channel was talking about one thing. The wedding that turned into a war. Photos of Chiamaka standing strong in her gown, eyes cold and unshaken, filled every screen. Her speech at the reception had gone viral. The audio recordings, the video, the arrest, it was all out in the world. People couldn't believe it. A betrayal that deep? By her twin and the man she was about to marry? The entire country was talking. Some called her heartless. Others called her heroic. But no matter the opinion, one thing was clear. Chiamaka Naji had not been defeated. At the police station, Toby sat behind bars, head down, hands shaking. His lawyers tried to spin the story, but it was too late. The voice recordings were real. The hotel staff confirmed what Chiamaka had seen. There was no escaping the truth. His company's investors pulled out. Contracts were cancelled. His reputation was gone. He wasn't a groom anymore. He was a headline, a warning. Chidinma, on the other hand, was in hiding. After her release on bail, she disappeared from the public eye. Rumors said she tried to flee the country. Others said she was hiding in her mother's village. But Chiamaka didn't care where she went. She was done looking over her shoulder. The press conference came 2 days later. Cameras clicked. Journalists filled the room, eager to see the woman who stopped her own wedding and exposed a crime. Chiamaka entered in a black power suit. No makeup, no jewelry, just presence. She walked to the podium, looked straight into the cameras, and spoke clearly. I didn't cancel my wedding because I was weak. I ended it because I was strong enough to know my worth. She paused. The room was silent. I was betrayed by people I loved. My twin sister, my fiancé. They planned to smile with me in front of the world, and then take my life behind closed doors. But I survived. She took a deep breath. I'm not here to beg for sympathy. I'm here to remind every woman watching, you are enough. You are not too loud. You are not too strong. You are not too much. You are exactly who you need to be. The entire hall stood and clapped. Weeks passed. The noise slowed down. The world moved on. But Chiamaka didn't hide. She returned to her company and faced every board member who doubted her. She removed every snake her father warned her about. She built her father's empire bigger than ever. One morning, as she stood on the balcony of her office, sipping tea, her assistant walked in. Madam, a new invitation came. Another gala. They want you to speak about your experience. Chiamaka chuckled. So now I'm a public speaker. The assistant smiled. A hero, madam. A symbol. Chiamaka turned back to the city below. No, I'm not a hero. I'm just a woman who refused to die quietly. Later that evening, she drove alone to a quiet spot. The same garden where her father used to sit. She walked slowly, wearing a simple white dress. The air smelled of fresh leaves and peace. She sat on a bench and closed her eyes. For the first time since everything happened, she allowed herself to breathe. No cameras, no noise, no pain, just peace. Then she whispered, I thought losing love would destroy me, but it didn't. It cleared the way for something greater. A butterfly landed on her shoulder, then flew off into the open sky. She smiled gently. Let them say what they want, she said quietly. I am still standing. And she was. Not just as a woman, not just as a bride, but as a throne that betrayal could not break.